Welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode, Gabe, Yanez, and I, we are joined by the co-founder of Born Primitive, former Navy SEAL, father, Bear Handlon. I really enjoyed this conversation. I got a lot out of it, and I'm excited to dive right in.
Yeah, man. I mean, the guy is the guy, right? Like, we go into some of the stats of what it takes to make it on the Navy SEALs. And I think that you forget, you're always like, oh, it's hard to get it through that. And I don't want to say that like, because he's a former Navy SEAL, that's all that he is. I mean, what he's built with Born Primitive, the story now of like, balancing having a daughter and trying to teach the lessons that he's learned through hard work to a daughter. Like, there's just so much to unpack here. I feel like we say this with a lot of guests, but like, we have to have him back on. There's just so many different directions that we could have taken the conversation that I think we covered like just the tip of the iceberg with, what we can talk about. I really enjoyed it. I know other people will.
When we start bringing guests on, we should start booking them for 2 sessions. Like, hey, come talk to us now, and then talk to us 6 months from now.
There's going to be a follow-up for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he played inside linebacker at Yale. And I mean, could you imagine, dude, inside linebacker at Yale, Division I, while basically having a lawnmower business? Like, it's just very unique storytelling. And it's action-packed the whole time. So yeah, guys, I hope you guys enjoy this one as much as Gabe and I did. As per usual, go back, check out other episodes. We just recently had Chris Spieler on. We've had, JP Donnell. We've had a lot of really great episodes with different focuses throughout based on where the conversation flows. And if you get value from this episode, as we always ask, share with a friend. Let them know about the podcast. It definitely helps us out. And leaving a rating and review, Gabe and I, we always love to check those things out, fires us up and keeps us moving forward on the podcast. So without any further ado, let's have a great conversation with Bear. Let's get it. So I was looking up like different just information about you. We've known each other for years, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to look into this Yale football. It's interesting to me, right? Division I, Yale is such like a big name in the world, actually. So I go on their website and I pull up your information, and underneath like personal, personal feedback or something like that, it says, Bear runs his own lawn mowing business, hopes to enter the U.S. Navy SEALs training after graduation. Dude, I just wanted to start off, like, at that point in time, were you running a lawn mowing? Like, were you an entrepreneur even when you were playing football back at Yale? How did that even work? Because when I saw that, I was like, wait, what? You're trying to run a lawn mowing business and play football in Division I? That sounds like a lot of work.
Yes. Yeah. I got that itch at a young age. I think in 6th grade, I launched my own lawn mowing business, and it consisted of me going door to door with a lawnmower and a weed whacker and asking people if I can mow their lawn. I think I got a few lawns out of sympathy. They probably just felt bad for me. So, a couple $20 lawns turns into 10, turns into 15. And did that all through high school. And then when I got to college, I did it through my junior year in college. And then I realized, like, all right, like, I'm about to get a Yale degree, so I should probably get something else on my resume than, mowing lawns in Indiana, right? So I went to New York City and did like a consulting internship, just to try that out, which definitely wasn't out for me. But yeah, I've always kind of had that itch, be your own boss, run your own business. Of course, it was to a much lesser extent when I'm just mowing lawns, but taught me so many good lessons. And, you got to like bill your clients and keep track of the accounting, and it was just all cash. So it's not like I had like a big accounting system, but just to bill your clients and send them the invoices and do these things. Like, it was a good little lesson for a, 8th grade kid to figure out. So glad I did it.
Did you ever hire any of your friends? Because my wife and I, when we were in high school, we had this thing where we would go buy college, we would go to buy Nintendo Wiis and then sell them on Craigslist because they were hot demand. But we ended up hiring our friends to go with us because you were only able to go buy one at a time. And so it turned into like this little business where, you'd bring in 7 friends and then you would pay them to go sit in line, and then they'd buy a Nintendo Wii and then we'd sell it on Craigslist. But when you were mowing lawns, did you try and like optimize your time by like hiring kids for $10 an hour and then charging, $30 a lawn or whatever it is? Or did you just do it solo?
A good question. So I ended up bringing my buddy Jake in, I played football with in high school, because he had a truck. Because before that, I was using my mom's minivan. I would have to rip all the seats out, put a tarp down, just pick it up, like a meathead, put it in there. And that was me rolling around the neighborhood in a minivan now. And then it was, my mom's minivan smelled like gasoline and cut grass. So Jake had a truck, and I was like, all right, opportunity. Jake, I'll cut you in 50-50, but we get to use your truck. But no, in hindsight, maybe I should have paid him hourly, but we just split every lawn 50-50. When I went to college, I had another buddy that owned a bunch of lawns, or he had his own business as well. And since obviously I was going out to Connecticut for school, once I left for summer camp, I had to give him all of my lawns, and he gave me a little bit of money for that. So I did, get to make a few bucks off of that. But no, I wasn't employing people yet. It was more of a 50-50 partner sort of thing.
Do you think that this, because we've had our fair share, I think that most guests that we've had have the entrepreneurial bug, that itch. Do you think that's something that you're born with? Do you think that's something that's like developed by parenting kids in like a specific way? Or maybe honestly, now that I'm thinking about it out loud as I asked the question, is it something that most of us are born with and it's kind of like we're discouraged from it in some way, shape, or form by some of the conventional schooling?
A good question. I think it could be a little bit of both. I think the part of my personality that I think aligns with being an entrepreneur is I think I've always been a little bit anti-authoritarian. I don't like to follow rules. It's not like I'm some, criminal, but you know what I mean? The fact someone else telling me what to do and how to do it, I think aligned with me. Hey, let me try to go do my own thing and kind of call the shots. Now it's ironic because then I would then go join the military, where you're listening to, everyone's telling you what to do. But within the group of guys I was with, every guy was anti-authoritarian because that's why we were where we were. But I think maybe some environment, my dad was a business owner, so maybe seeing him do that rubbed off on me. But I don't know. I think part of it is an itch. Like, Jason, I know you got it. You can't turn it off, right? And as soon as one thing ends, you're immediately on to the next thing. I mean, Born Primitive was launched right after a failed business, right? So it's like, you're just, what's next? You know what I mean? And I think that's just something you kind of have hardwired into your DNA.
Yeah, I can attest to the fact that Jason cannot turn that off. Very, very, very well aware. And I mean, another thing that I think is ironic though, is that at least when I think like, entrepreneur, a lot of the stories out there is that exactly what you said, right? Like they want to be their own boss, like a little bit tough, like following rules and structure and stuff, but you made it into Yale. I think that a lot of people that end up being an entrepreneur, like don't do well in school. Like it's the usual, like, I didn't get the best grades, but like, I was started my lawnmower business. Obviously you did really well in school and you were doing this. Do you think that is kind of the exception to the rule, or how did you feel about school that let you be that successful to get into such a, really competitive school?
Well, I think for me, I knew the formula to get into the Ivy League school because I was like, all right, I want to play collegiate sports. I think the Ivy League school would be a good opportunity, but my brother played there ahead of me. So I knew, okay, you have to be good. Everybody's there is all state, a lot of All-Americans, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of the standard. But you also have to good grades. So I thought, all right, if I focus on school and control and check that box, now it opens up an opportunity. If I can be a good enough football player, that's my in, right? And I'm just going to a public school in Indiana. You know what I mean? Pretty normal upbringing. Like if you don't have a unique way in, it's very difficult. So to me, from freshman year, that was my plan. I was like, I'm going to crush the books. I'm going to, take all the AP classes. I'm going to live in the weight room. I'm going to eat like a horse. I'm going to do all the extra work I can, around football, watching tape, and in the summer, trying to outwork everyone. And I said, if I can do both of those, I might have a shot at this. And I was obsessed with it. It would keep me up at night in high school, staring at the ceiling, thinking about, when that senior year came rolling around. I remember I was starting to get recruited. I went to some of the summer camps and they told me, all right, send us your first 2 games of game tape. Unedited. We don't want to highlight tape. We want to watch the whole game. And then we'll let you know. So I sent it to all the Ivy League schools, and, was able to commit early in the middle of my season, which was a huge relief. But imagine a 17-year-old kid going into his senior season, knowing, okay, these 2 next games are going to determine the rest of my life in some capacity. It's not to say it would have went bad if it didn't work out. And it had been something I had been working for 3 years that I was obsessed with. So I remember I was vomiting in the locker room before that first game. Fortunately it worked out. I played really well. And my first 2 games were good. The whole season was good, but, I knew once those were in the mail, I was like, all right, just play ball, wait for the call. And I think around week 6 or 7, I got the official offer, from 4 or 5 of those schools, and I committed to
Oh,
Yale.
wow.
So it worked out. But the reason it was a means to an end. I knew I wanted to focus on school because it would give me the opportunity. I didn't really like it, but I just knew this is what you just got to do. So hunker down and do it.
Well, I guess my question on that too is like, it sounds like there's just been a drive built in you. Obviously you have a really impressive resume, and we'll get into Born Primitive, of course, but I'm just backing up just for a second. Then we could kind of come back to this, is like with the lawn mowing business. I'm kind of like, I know I'm going back, but with your daughter, so your daughter's 3.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think you're going to look at money with her? And how do you think you're going to encourage her to earn it on her own, or are you going to give it to her? And where is that balance? Because it's something, you know, I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. So I'm like right in that mix right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, hey, you know, are we trying to do babysitting, dog walking? What are we trying to do? And for you, it sounds like it was naturally built in you, or did your parents foster that and say, hey, if you want the new scooter, you got to go do the thing? I mean, where's your appetite? Where do you think on that?
Yeah, great question. I think about this a lot. No, I got a little bit of time, right? She's 3. But this is like the $1 million question. It's right. Because, you know, you've achieved a little bit of financial success, you know, I have a comfortable life. It's not easy, but you know, I have nice things, and, you know, I've created that because of my own effort. And it's like, I don't want to create someone that's entitled or spoiled, because I want to make things easy for her. So I've kind of, you know, boiled it down to, I don't want her to experience hardship, but I want her to experience hard, right? I think there's a difference. And I think, you know, definitely as she gets older, making her get a job, even if it's cleaning horse stalls or something like that, because I feel like that's where at a young age you learn the value of hard work. Because we have to, you know, raise kids that are resilient, because it's ultimately just a disservice to them if we make everything easy. But it goes against almost your instinct as a parent, because you naturally want them to be comfortable and this and that. So it's hard, and particularly if you have a girl. I mean, I think if I had a son, it'd be hard. It'd be easier to kind of, you know, make him tough and, you know, wrestle and, you know, do all these things. And, you know, as a dad, like that would be, but it's like, I got this little girl that, you know, she's snuggling me at night and, you know, it's like, how do I make her life hard? Like, this is, you know what I mean? Like, I want it to be easy for her, but we have to be disciplined enough, because that will arm them with the tools they need when they get older. So I think it's critical that, I mean, I don't know if she's going to want to mow lawns, but what I loved about that is it was hard. It was labor. You know, it was a push lawnmower in the summer in Indiana. You're sweating your balls off. You're getting all dirty. It was lawn after lawn. You know, you'd mow 10 lawns in a day. You're out there all day long. You'd have a football practice Saturday morning. And then I knew the rest of the weekend I'm mowing all day long. And at the time you didn't realize it, right? You hated it, but think of what that instilled in the long run. You know what I mean? 10 straight years of literally mowing lawns every weekend between, you know, in the growing season. So I want to find the equivalent for her, because I think that's so critical, even though she's not going to like it. You know, we'll see. Maybe if you guys got pointers for what a girl can do. But I got a little time to figure that out.
And I'm even earlier than you. I have a 19-month-old son and a 2-month-old daughter. So I have plenty of time, but this is something that I think about all the time. One thing that and I don't know if this applies directly, but I heard this one liner and I really like it, is that parents should always be a safety net, but not a hammock. And that the difference is, you know, subtle, but not really, right? It's like, we're always there to catch them if they fall down, and they should never hit like true rock bottom, because we're always there to support. They'll always have a home. They'll, you know, never go hungry per se. But then I think it's the extreme of the hammock where it's like very comfortable that we want to stay away from. So that's something that I remember reading and I really liked it. So I'd share it with you. But yeah, I'd like to think that I have a lot of time, but these kind of things sneak up on you.
Dude, just before you know it, they do. And then all of a sudden you're talking about, you know, babysitting gigs or whatever it is. And it's like, oh man. And then Gabe and I, we've talked about this where it's like, you know, when you're younger and you look, you're like, oh yeah, I think I'd let my kid go, you know, walk downtown or whatever. Right. And then, you know, Bear, you're probably like, yeah, dude, I think when she's like this old, I'll let her go do this thing.
Yeah. Then the rubber meets the road and you're like,
yeah. Then they get that old to go do that thing. And then you're like, ooh, I don't know, you know, but I like what you're saying, you know, like you want to expose them to hard things, but not necessarily hardship. I do think that's a good way to articulate it. So I appreciate that. I want to talk about football. So what position did you play?
I was middle linebacker.
Dude, because you're a big guy, right? You're not a small human. And I could just imagine middle linebacker, dude. Oh my gosh, I could just imagine you just tackling some dudes with all kinds of power. But let's like kind of going back to those two games, and then looking at how this relates kind of the SEAL teams. I think is an interesting analogy in the future to get to. But when so the pressure is on your inside linebacker. That's a very like it's a pretty like front and center position. It's not like, you're active every single play, more or less, right? You probably led the team, I imagine, in tackles or close to. And so when you're getting ready for these two games that are going to be kind of make or break, and you're thrown up in the back, what type of things do you go through? And maybe this then translated into your military career, because I know that sport plays a lot in terms of the mindset. Did you have mindset coaches that were working with you at the time in high school and or at Yale that then have given you tools that transferred into the military and then with Born Primitive?
Not specifically, and definitely not high school. It was just old school, like watching Rocky and Gladiator and Braveheart before game. I mean, that was like, a 17-year-old kid. That was your mental prep. You know what I mean? Like, and no, there was nothing formal. I mean, it's way different now. And I don't know if like the current high school students, they focus on this part of the, this muscle, but we definitely didn't. But I think it comes down to preparation, right? Like if you go into something and you're prepared, you might still be nervous, but you have an underlying confidence of like, okay, I've done everything I can to control this situation that's about to hit me. And you just need to rely on the subconscious at that point, right? All of your training. And that became very apparent in the military. That's the ultimate example of that. So yeah, it worked out. But there was a lot of preparation, and it's one of those things that, when you spend all summer, working your butt off, and you have the conditioning, if you watch tape, so the opponent, the formations, it's already like, it's like you've studied for the test and you're going to smash it when it's given to you, because you've gone through every scenario you can. And in football, you have to do that. There's some sports like you don't really have to watch tape, but there's so many things to take into account in football that if you get good at studying the opponent, you can be one step ahead of it. I mean, I don't know if I just saw Tom Brady in an interview, and he was talking about how they would prep for games. And obviously Tom Brady was an incredible player, but what he revealed is part of the reason he was so good. It wasn't that he necessarily had the physical tools, but he knew the freaking defense almost every time, right? So they would just check to something because every defense in football, there's a vulnerability. It just depends on, hey, is that offense going to call the right play? If you're running cover 2 versus cover 4 versus this, there's a gap in every defense that you can exploit if you know what they're running. So it was fascinating when he kind of, got into that and was like, oh yeah, we just basically knew because they would just memorize everything. So pretty fascinating stuff. I did that to a much less degree as a 17-year-old kid going into that first game.
The level of preparation of some of these, GOATs, for lack of a better word, in sports, like you hear the Kobe Bryant stories, the Tom Brady stories, like once it comes out, the level of preparation that these guys did, it's then becomes obvious that they're the best. But to your point, like obviously they have physical ability, but it's just, you can't replicate in any way just doing the hours to like a 2x of what anyone else is doing and pulling so far ahead that it doesn't even matter. I love those stories. I love watching like the documentaries of GOATs once they retire, and just like seeing the behind the, under the hood of like what actually went down to make him that good. Because when you watch him play, it's so easy to think that like, wow, he was just born to be the best quarterback. But it's like, no, there were hours and hours. So a lot of that goes into it.
I want to ask you, Bear. So, you're playing football at Yale, obviously super high level at the time. I mean, based on the Yale website, you already knew you want to be a Navy SEAL, right? But then where was the apprehension with that? And then going and working for Red Bull. And what I'm also curious about is that then you're working at Red Bull, and then it keeps pulling at you. And then you decide, all right, I'm going to go join the teams. That's like I imagine compared to most people who take the Navy SEAL journey, yours was not normal. Correct me if I'm wrong, meaning like you graduate from a 4-year collegiate university playing D1, and then you choose to go basically into the corporate America, for lack of a better term, Red Bull. And then you go back, you go to the team. So like, can you talk me through the mindset there about not doing it right out of college, even though you wanted to? And then, yeah, we'll just start there.
Yeah. So originally the plan was to actually do it out of high school. So I was in 8th grade when 9/11 happened. And that was when I went home from school that day. I decided I'm joining the service and I want to be a SEAL if I can make it. I cut out the original newspaper clipping. They did a afternoon edition newspaper that day, the Vidette Times, and I cut it out. It was the towers burning, and I've had that newspaper clipping with me everywhere I've went since. It's right now it's in my garage above my squat rack, but it went with me to college. It went with me to the military on deployments. I've had it with me. So that was the motivation, right? As a young 8th grade kid, I said, all right, eventually when I'm able to fight, I want to join this fight. My parents convinced me once I started getting recruited for sports of like, hey, we know you want to do this, but why don't you go get a college degree? And if you still want to do this crazy dream and go to the SEAL teams, then you can do it when you graduate. So that's what I did. I thought it was a fair deal. I could still play football, knock some heads, move some weights. It seemed like a good opportunity to get a college degree. And then, I was with Mallory at the time, and I had to repair my shoulder. I had a labrum surgery. So I knew, okay, at least I got to take, 6 months to rehab this before I could. So I took the job with Red Bull as to kind of buy me some time while I could train and get my body back in shape and transition my fitness from football to long distance running, swimming, all that stuff. I knew that was going to take time. Well, what was supposed to be a year turned into 4 years. Because I was getting a lot of pressure from the family. Mal and I were about to get married. She didn't want me to do it. Her parents really didn't want me to do it. My mom was vehemently against it. My dad was supportive, but pretty much everyone was saying, hey, don't go do this. It's dangerous. It's crazy. You have a good life in Indiana. You got a good job. It's a fun company. Like, why do you need to go do this crazy thing? So I ultimately shelved it for a minute. And I had been training with all these guys in Indianapolis that are absolute monsters. That all made it. We were going to the pool every morning and tying ourselves up and going out to the track and running 800s and 400s and push-ups and pull-ups, the whole thing, getting ready. And they all got contracts and went. And I pulled out at the last second. And it started eating away at me because they started getting through the training, right? And I was staying in touch with them. Now they're through Hell Week. Now they're through second phase. They just graduated buds. Now they're in SQT. Oh, they just got pinned with their trident. Now they're at a SEAL team doing deployments. And I'm in Indiana living this easy life, competing in CrossFit, having fun, with a good corporate job. And it ate me up. So I started secretly training back at the pool again, and sneaking out to the track. And it was funny because no one knew. Mallory didn't even know. Because I told her I was going to the pool to train for CrossFit because, maybe there's a swim event. I got to get ready for it, right?
Because you were competing at the CrossFit Games on a team in what year was that? 13?
Yeah, 2013. Yeah, the year you did the burden run and came into the stadium like a mile ahead of everyone. Yeah, I was competing. Yeah.
Oh, that year. Okay.
Yeah.
No.
I remember that moment vividly. I was in the stands and you came out. That was a cool event. I remember we talked about that. So it was 2013 and I had started to do CrossFit to get ready for SEAL training because two of the guys that were in our group were doing CrossFit. I didn't even know what CrossFit was, but they were killing me in the runs. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Because we're doing all the same track workouts. We had like a track coach and I'm like, why am I not getting better comparatively? And they were like, oh, we're doing this thing at night called CrossFit. So I joined the CrossFit gym. They were super competitive. And since I had a football background, at least I had the basics. I didn't know any of the gymnastic stuff. And I was able to sneak onto their team and make it to the games with them. But Mallory ultimately found some wet rope in my gym bag. And she was like, why do you have wet rope in your gym bag? And what I had been doing, because that's what I was using to tie myself up in the pool. And so she's going through probably like to throw my laundry in or something and sees this and like drops it on the kitchen counter. It's like, what is this? And I was like, ooh, it's not what you think it is. And then I explained, imagine when she's
take that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we kept it as our secret for a while. And I had told her we were getting ready to get married. I basically said, hey, I have to do this. If you're not okay with that, everything's fine, but we need to call the wedding off. And then I said, you got 24 hours, think about it, but tell me in the morning. And then I'm rolling out on this. No one is stopping me. I will regret it the rest of my life. This is 100% happening. I love you, but I got to do it or I'll be 60, staring at the ceiling, thinking about this. So she woke up the next morning and said, all right, MFer, you can do it, but you better not effing quit. And I was like, done. And that's what we did. So I entered the game late, but better late than never. And then, we went out to California for training and then we got stationed in Virginia Beach and we were running Born Primitive the whole time. And that's a whole nother, obviously side story that, was a side hustle at the beginning of all of that. So
I really want to get into the fact that you built this while you were doing that, but I'm curious, do you remember like that promise that you weren't going to quit and how big of a deal that was and how much of a chance you were taking? Like, did that play into actually getting you through all of that? Like, do you vividly remember, like, there were times where you were like, man, I have to see this through now?
No, not specifically.
No?
I think my conviction was a lot deeper than that, but I did joke about it a few times to guys when it was really bad of like, dude, I'm not allowed to quit because my wife will freaking kill me.
My wife,
you know what I mean?
killed me.
like you don't understand, dude. Like we changed our life for this. I can't quit in 2 weeks. You know what I mean? So, I was actually sitting at dinner with a kid who's going to Buds later this year, and he was asking me all these questions. Hey, how do I get my mind right? And how do I make it? And they crushed us pretty good. We started with about 215 guys. By the end of Hell Week, which is just a few weeks in, they had us down to 19, and only 9 originals from that class graduate. I got lucky. I was one of the 9.
Is that a normal statistic? Because that seemed pretty extreme what you just said, or is it normally a little bit more and maybe they just crushed you guys a little extra hard?
It's a little bit more, not by much. We got unlucky in the fact that our Hell Week was in November, and it was really cold. So guys were not having a good time with that, and that thinned the herd real fast. You do a couple nights in the Pacific Ocean with that sun down for, but at that time that the sun is down, it goes down at like 5:30, and it doesn't come up again until so the night is long, right? It's not a summer night where it's 9 o'clock and the sun's still up. So that has an impact. And I think a lot of really good dudes didn't make it. I think that's the kind of the craziest part is when you show up that first day and you meet your class, because as an officer, we show up from a different basic training, and everyone there, for the most part has been thinking about this moment for many years. They've been training for it for many years. A lot have really good athletic pedigrees, Division I athletes, all Americans. We had a UFC fighter who had left the UFC to try. He didn't make it. MLB baseball player, he didn't make it. It's a wild smorgasbord of guys that all have the same intent, and we're all motivated. And you look around that first day before you start, and you're like, where are they going to trim the fat? Because they're saying historically it's minimum 80% that will fail. But you're looking, and that was a little unnerving, looking around being like, all right, who's quitting? Because I don't see anyone right now that looks like they're going to quit. Everyone's, so, but then real quick, shit hits the fan, and you see how quickly that happens when the discomfort, and I think the difference is just the reasons for being there. And not to say the guys that made it or didn't make it didn't have the right reasons, but I think it has to go deeper, and the guys that make it actually have to want to do the job when it's done. Genuinely, I think a lot of people get attached to the romantic idea of the symbolism, and like now your title you're going to carry the rest of your life, and how people will look at you. That shit goes out the window real quick. And then your body starts to justify that outlet, that off ramp that you can take. And the guys that roll in that just don't have an off ramp, that have burned the boats, that's the only way to make it. And that's what I told this kid at dinner. I said, listen, man, if you have a backup plan, you better bury that shit right now, because on day 2, when you're in the Pacific Ocean, it's 2:00 in the morning, that backup plan will become so easy to justify that your human nature, you will take it. Every guy does. So I said, bury it, eradicate it from your brain. Don't think, oh, my dad will still be proud of me. I can go work for the family business. I could go do this. No, get all of it out of your head, because all of those voices will get very loud, and you will take it. You'll take the out, and you'll take the hot shower and the coffee. And then an hour later, you're going to say, what the hell did I just do? And that's what happens to all of them.
All right, we're taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about what we have coming up on the Train Hard app in the month of July. So we're halfway through the year, which means that all the programs on the Train Hard app are entering a new training phase for the months of July, August, and September. So if you've been waiting, if you've been thinking about joining the Train Hard app, now is a great time to do it, because we're turning the page on the first half of the year and going into brand new focuses. Force is going to be focused on building some raw strength in the back squat, the deadlift, and the bench press. We're also going to be working on developing some strength in some body weight movements, the pull up, the dip. So just a lot of really great structured strength work, as well as the conditioning to make sure that you keep that engine going strong. So a lot of strength focus in Force. So if you're trying to get strong this summer, absolutely something to check out. And then on the flex side, we have a brand new training phase as well. And that first 6-week cycle as part of that training phase is going to have a big focus on these giant sets. So 5 exercises per muscle group that you'll do in quick succession. So you'll do something like a bench press, then you'll do dumbbell bench press, then you'll go incline dumbbell bench press, then you'll do dips, and then you'll do push-ups back to back to back. The pump on these sessions is unreal. And I promise you, if you're trying to build muscle, if you've struggled to put on a little bit of weight, this is going to be the way to do it. This is going to be the way to improve your body composition. I'm super excited. And then the last thing is we now also have past cycles of Flex available as an ebook. So if you're just not trying to download another app, you don't want to be on a monthly subscription, you can now access Flex specifically by going on the Train Hard shop and purchasing the ebooks for either just a 6-week cycle or the full first training phase of the year. So highly recommend checking that out. Highly recommend getting on the Train Hard app. Let's get strong. Let's get big. Now let's go back to the podcast. I feel like I've heard on a couple different podcasts with people that have gone through buds and stuff that, and you described it a little differently in that you looked at the group and it was like, I don't know who's going to quit here. But I've heard that it's sometimes the people that you think are least likely to make it through because it's so not like what you see. Like it's not and I know that you're a D1 athlete, but it's not the, all-American D1 athlete that's like, it's the other guy, because I forget who said this. It might've been Andy Stump. I forget, but say that like, it's the people that have like the emotional calluses to where like, they just, have gone through so much hardship that they're just like, it's more their mindset that's tough than their body. But any particular, truth to that maybe some of the people that you were like, oh, there's no way that person's going to make, and that's the person that makes it.
Absolutely. 100%. Now there are some guys you're like, all right, that makes sense. All-American wrestler, cauliflower ear. That dude's a hard MFer. Like he made it. Right. But then there was an All-American that didn't make it. But yeah, there absolutely is true. There was one guy, probably 140 pounds, soaking wet, no athletic background, poor Mexican kid from a bad part of LA. You know what I mean? He's in our crew, right? And he makes it, and he's an absolute savage. And it's just because literally you would have had to kill that kid. I won't say his name. I think he's still active just for his sake. But they would have literally had to kill him to get him to stop. That's it. Like no exaggeration. Only death would have not allowed him to make it. And that was so cool to see that, because, I came in with like an athletic pedigree, and then here's this poor Mexican kid from a bad part of LA, and he's with our crew, but it was, he had the same mentality. So it didn't matter. And that's what I loved about it, because it was all merit. There was it was, you know what I mean? There was no partiality to anyone. It was like, hey, whoever can cut it makes it. And that was super cool to see, because you definitely kind of like maybe judged a few people going into it of like, oh, that guy's definitely going to make it. And then he would quit in the first hour, you know what I mean? So that part was awesome. The crew we had by the end, smorgasbord of guys that you would have never guessed.
Dude, I can't believe it dropped down. Like that's like what, 5%, right? You went from like 250 or something like that to like what, 20? And that wasn't even your original crew. You said you had like 9 in your original crew. That's wild.
I think we had about 215, and they got us to 19 by, in the Hell Week. And then when we graduated, of those 19, I think there were only 9 originals.
Yeah. So like 5, 10. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So we lost another 10 that got rolled back to another class. But yeah, it was to see that, I've never been through it. I was like, holy shit, this is the real deal.
well, how do you do that? So you're at Red Bull, and actually at the time that you're at Red Bull, I don't want to say it was the peak of Red Bull, because Red Bull's had a great trajectory this whole time. But I remember there was a time when I was like in college and Red Bull was pumping, and you were probably right there in the mix with were you on their marketing team? Is that what it was?
Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you're right there in the mix, probably doing some cool projects, I imagine. Like, it's not like you're sitting at, I don't know, you're not doing like, I don't know, name the job that's way more boring than a Red Bull job. And so you're having this cool career. I imagine it wasn't crazy, boring. And yet you still had I guess I don't know how to ask this question the right way, because it's like, how do you tell someone you're about to marry that like, hey, I'm doing this, and like, regardless. So now here's this, you're potentially going to lose your relationship. Your family wasn't super on board with it, aside from your dad. It sounds like he was supportive. but yet you still had the, like, you know, the ability or the want to say, hey, I'm doing this regardless of what anybody else thinks. And I'm just curious how you even get to that point in something, because I imagine that plays such a strong role in what you're doing with Born Primitive and all these other things. You have the gumption. That's the word I'm looking for, to just say, hey, I'm doing it. It's powerful.
Yeah. All I would say is that it was eating away at me for so long, particularly once my friends kind of went through and started kind of getting through the program. The guilt just kept getting bigger and bigger. And I think this is true with anyone in life. If there's a constant voice telling you something, like, eventually you have to listen to it. You can only avoid it for so long. And I remember one day I was sitting, you're right, it was an easy life. I had everything going. Red Bull was awesome. I was having a blast. They're flying me around the country. We're doing all these cool things. And I'm learning about marketing, and good friend group with our CrossFit crew. And we're working out for 3 hours a day. It was a good life. And I remember sitting there, I was a Saturday morning, I was watching the college football, or getting ready to, and I'm sitting in air conditioning in like early September. It's hot out. And I'm like drinking a beer, eating some wings, watching the college football. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, there's dudes that are, 5 years younger than me that are fighting in a war right now. And I'm a former Division I athlete, 240 pounds, running a 5:15 mile, could, squat a house. What a waste of talent that I'm sitting here in this comfort while there's kids that are 19 years old that are fighting for me. And that just like that hit me. Right. And that's when I was like, all right, no more. I got to at least do my part. Or at least hopefully have the opportunity to. And that's just kind of how I transitioned into, like, there's no way I can keep this, like, a lid on this for forever. So let's just do it now. And I realized there was going to be collateral damage from that. I knew it, but it was like, sometimes I think you have to be a little bit selfish for the right reasons. And I had kind of deemed that needed to be one of those. Now, unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. Mal and I ended up getting divorced, for spouses in the military, when their husbands are gone 250 days out of the year while they're trying to hold things down at home. That's a hard formula for a marriage. So I wouldn't say, it was this romantic fairy tale ending. It wasn't. But that's unfortunately a very common reality in that line of work, particularly in a special operations unit, because of the stress that it puts on the family. But Mal and I are super tight still. We run the business together. Our office is right next to mine. Great relationship. But I knew there was a possibility of that ultimately happening. And unfortunately, that part did come true.
I think it's super powerful too, what you were saying about having the self-awareness at still a relatively young age of, I'm going to be 60 staring at the ceiling, hoping I had done this. Do you think that the fact that you had your friends going through it, like that constant reminder, do you think that maybe without that you would have just kind of wrote it out, or you think inevitably you would have had to try it either? Because I think a lot of people, miss the boat on the thing and live with that regret. Like, it's something that you hear a lot. And I think it's because sometimes it's very easy to kind of forget about it for long enough until you're maybe stuck in a position where you can't go try it. How valuable do you think it was to have that group that was going through it and just constantly reminding you, like, hey, we got through this. Hey, we got through this.
I'd say it was a good part of it, but I think had you removed that, it still would have happened.
You still would have done it.
But I think that was more, maybe that sped it up a little bit. You know what I mean? And that made it all more real when I could see myself in their shoes. And like, had I gone with them at the same time, I'd be pinned right now. I'd be going to a team, and I'd be, you know what I mean? And I'm like, you start getting that big time FOMO. But I think either way, it probably would have happened, because I don't think I was kicking it.
Yeah.
I want to ask about Mallory. So one of the first times you and I connected was at Wadapalooza. We were on like a panel discussion, and that was when you were still active duty. You told me one of the best stories I've ever heard of when you're in the van. Maybe you can share a story, but before we get to, like, that was one of the best stories ever. Just the way you said it. But I do want to talk about that briefly. But to Mallory, because you did mention her. So she's sitting, right next to you. She's chief operating officer of the company. You've built up Born Primitive, which again, Born Primitive, I think you've done incredible stuff. You just released, well, not just released, but you have shoes, you have apparel, you have a ton of stuff. And you did that when you were active duty. But how do you maintain a relationship with a significant other when you guys decide, So before you guys got a divorce, was it a good thing to work with your spouse? And what did you learn from that experience? And then as you decided to get a divorce, what type of, I guess, kind of rules or whatever have you had to make that so successful? Because the fact that you're still partners is huge.
Yeah, I would say for starters, running a business with your spouse, I would not advise. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think it may make it hard to separate work from being husband and wife, particularly if you're two very competitive people that want to succeed, right? It's hard to shut it off, right? So, that was definitely, she's very competitive, type A like me. And as a result of that, the business became something because we were both committed. For 6 years, it was just me and her. We never, it was self-funded. We never really raised any institutional capital. I'm active duty. So every waking second we had, where I wasn't doing that, we were working on more primitive. At night, we'd get home, we'd both have our laptops out, and their TV beyond, but didn't even pay attention. Hey, did you see that email from so-and-so? And, go till midnight, close the laptops and go to bed, start it all over again. Even on vacations, I remember we would go to Hawaii once a year. We would get up at 4 a.m. to start work because in the East Coast, that was business hours, and we worked till noon. And then we'd be like, okay, at noon, we can start our day. Right. So we'd be waiting for the Starbucks to open at like 6 a.m. We'd walk in and we worked till noon. And to us, that was totally normal. And now I realize in hindsight, I should have had more awareness that, well, this is the right thing to do, to be scrappy and, launch a successful business. At some point, you have to shelve that and be present with your spouse. You know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, we flew across the, country in the Pacific to like go do emails in our hotel room at 4:00 in the morning. Like, that's nuts. You're not recharging your batteries if you're doing that. If you're going to bed at 7:30 when you're on Hawaii, on vacation. So in hindsight, I definitely reflect back on if I had done it differently, what would I have done? But part of it, it's like, hey, hard truth is like, sometimes that's what it takes. You know what I mean? Maybe if we weren't doing that, this thing would have fizzled out. We wouldn't have 70 employees right now and all the things we have, right? So it's one of those things. Like if you want to be, exceptional in something, you have to put in an exceptional effort. And unless you have this overwhelming outlier in talent, which that's definitely not me in anything, not physical abilities or I've always had to outwork to get there. And that's the only way. So yeah, I definitely reflected on that quite a bit, but it's been great. Again, it's respectful. She is absolutely savage. She's super talented. She's really good at the things I'm not good at, and vice versa. So we balance really well. And we got lucky, CrossFit was exploding. So we kind of rode that surge as well. So a little bit of luck, a little bit of effort. And here we are, but not without, a few, a little bit of collateral damage on the family front, but everything's fine now.
Well, because I brought it up, you told me a story one time. I just think it's entertaining. So I want to hear it. You told me a story one time where you were basically, you guys were you were driving a van. Remember that story you told me?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
If you don't mind, can you just share that? I just think it's so entertaining. Yeah. Like, I can just imagine that. Anyways, go ahead.
Well, so we were doing some training locally in Virginia Beach, and it was a training exercise where we was going to start at night, and then we were going to go do some sneaky peeky stuff at some base. Is this all like, it's not a real scenario? This is a training scenario, right? And the instructors were going to give us a 30-minute head start from leaving the base to drive to the other base, where we would kind of insert into the woods and try to basically not be seen, and then they'd come try to like find us while we're doing these different parts of this like mission profile we were doing. So we left the base. I got half of our platoon in the van, and the other van is whatever driving behind us, and we're all kitted up, night vision goggles, helmets on, because as soon as we park, we're rolling. All the weapons were in the back of the van, and we got pulled over. I don't know if I ran a yellow or whatever, and we pull off, and we're like, shit, because we're on the clock. Like, the instructor's not going to not leave later. So cop comes up, I'm in full body armor, night vision goggles, you know what I mean? I've got my, it's like, all right, I'm going to squeeze my hands on the steering wheel. And he's like, hey, do you have any weapons? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I said, I'm going to need to open up the back. And so we open up the back, and there's like 4 belt-fed machine guns and a bunch of suppressed M4s and all these things. And he just looks at all these guys that turn around and look at him that all have night vision goggles on as well. And he's like, what the hell? And it's a military town. So he quickly figured out what was going on. And it was just a very hilarious interaction. The look on his face when we opened up the back, because I didn't tell him like, hey, I just said, yeah, we do. And he said, all right, well, let me see. And it's just a bunch of, belt-fed machine guns. So we hauled ass out of there. We got it in time, but that was a good laugh for the guys when he was like, all right, beat it, get out of here. Oh, good times.
Man, you can literally only imagine the face, the reaction.
That's why it was such a good story, Gabe, because when he told me the first time, I just imagined this deputy just like, hey, sir, do you have weapons? Like, yes, we do. And he's thinking like maybe there's like a pistol on the ground or something. I don't know what he thinks. And then boom, you got these That's so good, Bear. Thanks for sharing that again. Thank you.
I'm sure he went back to the station that night and probably told them that story. But yeah, that was good. It was a good one.
So you're in the SEAL teams, and I think it's a good point to get into, at least for me, Born Primitive, and Gabe, obviously wherever you want to go. But so you're in the SEAL teams, and I wrote this down, is that you're in the teams, you're building up Born Primitive. At that point, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, you got a 7-figure business. It's doing, it's doing real business. It's not, it's not a small operation. And then Mallory gets pregnant, or you have a child, right? And you had to make a decision and kind of pivot where your time and attention was. And so you had been in for, I don't know, maybe 7 years. So what was that process like? Because I guess in a similar way, I had to make some of those type of decisions over time with competing at the CrossFit Games, building a business. And then all of a sudden when family becomes when you have kids, you only have so much time. And so what was that process like for you, and how did you get through that?
Yeah, it was definitely difficult. And just to clarify, I have a child, but it's not with Mal, another relationship post divorce. Okay. So at the time we were both kidless, hungry to get after it. And I think that's why it was able to work. As now that I'm a father, I know, like, had I tried to do this with kids, it would have been very difficult. And if I made it work, I would have been a bad dad, like just flat out. There's no way I could have put out that output and having a balanced family. So I'm grateful that we had that window of time to really get after it. It was just, honestly, man, I had to learn to compartmentalize what I was doing. And because, there's obviously a lot of stress with the military job. And then I would come home, and then Mal would have, you're a business owner, you understand, it's just, you're solving problems all the time. And you're having to make decisions all the time. So I would have to lock the previous job in a box, even if maybe that was stressful, or maybe we had a stressful day the next day that I knew was going to be intense. And all right, lock that up. Don't worry about it right now. We're focusing on Born Primitive now. And then same thing, shut the laptop. All right, that's turned off. Now I got to make sure I get to work the next day, prep my gear, and be a reliable teammate, because it would have been unfair to those guys if I was 80% in on the main job, right? But it would have been unfair to Mal if I was half-assing Born Primitive. So I just kind of had to, and I think I learned that in college, playing, collegiate sport, while also trying to balance like the academics at Yale. Like, the football coaches owned us, but then I'd have to go to class, and I'd be like, all right, I got to lock that up for a minute because I'm still a student, right? And so I think I maybe trained that skill in college and developed it because time management was so critical when you're a collegiate athlete. That's pretty much what it was, man. I mean, I got so scrappy that, like, I would send emails out from like the helicopter. Like, we'd be, like in training. I remember we were down in Florida doing like a shipboarding exercise. And the pilot came on the net, the headset, and was like, hey, we're going to do racetracks for 40 minutes because the ship that we're going to hit isn't like in position yet. So like, all the guys are just screwing around, and my legs are hanging out over the Gulf, and I pull my phone out of like one of my mag pouches, and I'm like, all right, well, let me knock a few emails out, right? Because it was either do them now or when I get back at 2:00 in the morning that night and get back to my hotel room. And guys, it was fine. But I remember, and then, you get like the 1 minute out call, and you're like, all right, cool, put the phone away, let's go rock and roll. So it was the constant back and forth of, being efficient with your time. And just being scrappy. And I think, honestly, like, we've always had a chip on our shoulder here at Born Primitive. I've always felt like we were the underdog, and I think we were, because the brands we were competing with was like, the Nobles of the world that are raising millions of dollars in capital, that are sponsoring all these big athletes that are full-time running their company. Right. And, I think by that time, some of these entities had raised north of 40, $50 million. Right. And here we are, Mal and I still in the garage. I'm an active duty. We've raised no money, and we're trying to compete. Right. And so I was always like, I had that kind of underdog mentality that, okay, well, I'm going to outwork them. The fact that we're kind of, we're not as big as some of these entities, but I think we're at least in the conversation and have raised no money. And oh, by the way, for 90% of our company, I had a 60-hour-a-week job that left me out of the country, many days out of the year. Is something I'm proud of, but I haven't lost that kind of that underdog mentality, because that's what it took. And that's why, I get a little fired up sometimes. Like I've never felt like we truly had a seat at the table with CrossFit. I've always felt like we're kind of, we're part of it, but not, you know what I mean? Like there's certain people that won't return a call from me, but I know if the other entity emailed them, they, you know what I mean? And it's been good though, because it motivates me. You should see what some of the shit I have up in my office, pinned up on the wall. That's
like some old emails or whatever. Yeah. Like, I mean, well, it was interesting that you asked that, but Gabe, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was just going to ask, I can obviously see and feel the passion of how that's a big piece of what fires you up and how do you work. But now you said there's 70 people on the team. How do you make that a part of, because you said it's kind of part of our culture here. How do you make that something that everyone feels to an extent and drives them and gets them going?
Well, I think a lot of times for the newer employees, I'll try to bring up some of those old stories occasionally just to remind them, we have this beautiful air conditioning building now, and we're building a 60,000 square foot facility down the road that's going to have a 7,000 square foot gym and cold tubs and saunas and all these things. At one point, it was our house, and then the first place was a warehouse that was on the final landing approach of the F-18s. It would rattle the freaking ceiling. The landlord wouldn't fix the air conditioning. A bunch of my buddies were banging barbells on the other side of the wall because I allowed them to come work out in our little warehouse gym. And I'd be trying to take business calls. I didn't even have a desk. There was a conference table, right? There's like 8 of us packed into one little room, and then all the warehouse was in the back. So I have to remind them, hey, like it wasn't always nice like this, right? And so it's probably like, oh, it's the old guy telling the war stories or whatever. But I think it's good to kind of let them know a little bit of the heritage, for lack of a better term, of the company. And it doesn't mean like we got to go back to that, but hey, let's just remember what it took to get here. And I think it, hopefully is received somewhat well, and not like the eye roll of, oh, here we go, you're going to tell us how they didn't have air conditioning. Yeah.
back in my day, we didn't have, but I gotta, you had so much passion to get into the SEAL teams, right? You were prepared to make the sacrifices you made and whatnot, but yet then kind of going back to your daughter being born, was that like an instant, like, what did that instantly like change from like, hey, hey, I have these personal goals of mine, to now it's like, oh, I need to change for her, because you got out basically when she was born. So I'm curious, like how being a dad changed your mindset from where you were 8 years prior leaving Red Bull to where you're at when you get out.
Yeah. It was honestly just I had to have an honest conversation with myself of, okay, right now I have 2 very demanding things that I'm doing, Born Primitive and the military. There's about to be a third thing added to the mix that is more important than both of them. Am I okay with being 70% at all 3 of these things? The answer is no. Well, what's the only way to fix that? Well, I have to get rid of one. There's no way around it. I can't all of a sudden grab 10 extra hours in the day, right? So I obviously had to do some soul searching at the time. I was getting more senior in the military. At the time I was in charge of 30 some dudes. We were going on a Middle Eastern deployment, and Born Primitive was getting more serious. So the contracts are getting bigger, the numbers are getting bigger. There's more at stake. Now by that time I think we had 35 employees. That as a business owner starts to weigh on you, because you realize that a lot of the decisions you're going to make potentially affect someone's livelihood, for good or bad, right? If I make a wrong decision or say something stupid, and Born Primitive all of a sudden goes down the tubes. Well, there's 35 people that were relying on us to make, good. So that weight, that burden was getting heavier. As soon as you start getting people moving across the country, moving their families and becoming employed by you, wow, this is real. So I just had to make that hard call. I said, all right, it was almost 8 years. It was a good run. I learned a lot. I think I became a better man in the process. I got to serve my country. But hey, you got to be a man and make a decision and cut it loose. And I knew, hey, if there's ever a major conflict that would ensue, I'll find a way to get back in the mix. But at the time, there was relative peace, and it was easier to walk away knowing that I wasn't really walking away from a significant conflict where my own guys were still out there getting after it.
Man, there's a lot of ways we can take this conversation. I know we're running out of time. One question that I did have for you, I'm super curious, because you mentioned that you and Mallory have very different strengths. So that has helped you really continue to work together on the business side, right? Do you have any sort of like formal framework that you use on the team, like personality tests or anything that you guys use to like make sure that you have the right people with the right strengths in the right positions? Or have you just, winged it, for lack of a better term, and the people that don't fit the right, positions have just kind of been weeded out?
We haven't done anything formal, but I've actually heard really good things about some of those tests you can do, and you actually put in their job description and it will like grade them. And we just haven't like pulled the trigger on it, but I've listened to some business podcasts of some very seasoned like business owners and, CEOs, and they said that's like a game changer. So I think that's something worth exploring, but I think we've gotten just better at kind of being able to feel that out in interviews. And as we've gotten bigger, I think we attract more of the right talent. Where in the early days, we were just kind of hiring spouses and like, my buddy's wife and this and that. And it was great. Everyone was, working hard, but we really didn't have anyone that was a subject matter expert in this business. Right. And now we're bringing in talent where these people are like, they're assassins in the different disciplines that they've been brought in for. And that makes it really exciting, because then, I can just turn them loose and let them do their thing. And I just kind of hopefully steer the ship in the general direction, but they're way smarter and more talented than me. So I think it's worth looking into for anyone running a business. I've heard great things. We just have not done it yet.
Yeah. One particular one that I've been spending a lot of time looking into is Working Genius, the 6 Types of Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni. Highly recommend. It comes highly recommended. But I wanted to tie it back to the SEAL teams, because do they do anything specific to find kind of the right person for the right roles? And did you learn anything in your time there that you now bringing into like building a well-rounded team in business? Because, in both areas, you need a well-rounded team that's going to be able to accomplish a mission successfully, whether it's, sales and Born Primitive and what you guys are doing, building a brand, or whatever it is you have to do with the Navy SEALs,
Yeah, they do a pretty extensive psych test for guys. It's that 800 question one where they ask you a bunch of weird questions. And I don't know. I mean, they definitely rely on it. I think it's mainly just to determine you're not totally nuts, although there's definitely screws loose. So clearly it's enough to pass the test. But I think once you get in, I think the biggest lesson learned was, the standard is so important to the guys that are already in that they hold the standard, and it's sacred. It's sacred because particularly the guys that have seen a lot of combat, they understand the risks of someone not upholding the standard. So when you get in that environment, it's really cool to be just exposed to that, because it's sink or swim. It's like, hey, this is the standard of this community. If you can't hack it, then get the hell out. And even, after you graduate SEAL training, you get to your platoon and your SEAL team, and they take your trident back. And you have to re-earn it from the guys that are not in the schoolhouse anymore. This is a real SEAL platoon, and they are going to tell you when you've earned it back. So that was really cool. So for those 4 years you're in the Navy, you haven't even really technically, like, from your peers, earned that professional respect. So you're constantly striving to be a good teammate and go in early, stay late, do the thankless jobs. And all you want to be is seen as reliable and dependable by your teammates. That's all that matters. And you will do anything to get there. So that's why there's no formal workout program, right? You don't need it, because guys will get after it on their own the most. If a guy doesn't, and he's a little bit overweight and out of shape, guess what? They are going to let him know, and dramatic fashion, and he will learn real quick that is not tolerated in this community. In a lot of places that would not fly. The way we kind of police our own, if the corporate world saw that, they would shit themselves. But I love that, because I think that's how it should be. If there's a standard that we're going to maintain and you can't maintain it, you know what I mean? There's going to be dire consequences, because the other way that goes is in a real life scenario, you become a liability, and now guys might die or become injured because you weren't willing to put in, work out and work on your fitness and, all these other things that you have to maintain. So I love that. Now I can't apply that all the way to business, which I've learned. I've had to kind of filter a little bit of those lessons, because I've been told, hey, this is not the SEAL teams. You gotta reel it in a little bit. And I'm still finding where that balance is, because on one side, it's like there's so many good lessons that I can now apply to business, but I also have to understand these are people that don't have that same kind of upbringing, and they did not get exposure to that extreme environment. So I need to kind of tone it down a smidge, but while still hopefully extracting some of the key tenets of that.
Yeah, I love that. That's super. I mean, I can only imagine that balance for you, especially being in for 8 years and building the business. Where's Born Primitive? Born Primitive always showed up right at Wodapalooza, man. Oh, always.
Yeah.
Always showed up right. And I'm just curious, the business has grown. Obviously, CrossFit's kind of gone through some evolution, for lack of a better term. Are you guys interested in other spaces? Because I think you roll jiu-jitsu, right?
A little bit. I need to get more into it. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what's the plan for Born Primitive? And for people who are unfamiliar with Born Primitive, what's Born Primitive? I mean, we've been talking about it a little bit, but I think we probably forgot to address exactly what it is for people who are unfamiliar with it.
Yeah. So started as a workout apparel company, we kind of cut our teeth in CrossFit. It's kind of the roots of the brand, and we've expanded it quite a bit since. With athleisure, maternity, swimwear. We launched our Savage One training shoe last June, which is absolutely killed. And then we've launched an outdoor line for kind of backcountry hunters. And then most recently, we launched Born Primitive Tactical, which is basically like operational wear for guys that are doing the job, or girls that are doing the job in law enforcement and military. And that was kind of stemmed from me once being that person. I kind of knew where the need was for product innovation. And since I had an apparel background, I was like, well, this is perfect. So we started building out that team, and, we're less than a year in, and we're really starting to disrupt that market, which is really exciting, because I saw a lot of complacency in that whole tactical world. And I was like, we're going to steamroll these guys. And that's kind of been what's happening in the early going. So we cast a pretty wide net now. But in the early days, it was a pair of compression shorts that I had the neighbor stitch up across the street. And that's how Born Primitive was born.
Good. That's awesome. Yeah. I was rocking your shoes yesterday and today. I was putting them for the ride on like a CrossFit style workout. The GoRuck has these runners that I like because they're a little bit softer and they have like a heel raise for my poor ankle flexibility. But your shoes remind me a lot, and I'm sure you've heard this. Like they reminded me a lot of like a blend between the Nano 2 and a Innovate-ish with but look a little bit better. I think that's a compliment. I mean, those were very popular shoes for a long time for CrossFit, and I think you guys did a good job with it. So, dude, I'm super stoked you guys are crushing those.
Thank you. And that was, I like the Nano 2 a lot. I just wish it was a little bit more stable, right? Because once you broke those in, after a while, your foot would kind of roll over the side. And so that was a bit of, the inspiration, at least some of the components, because I had worn every one, or maybe not all of them, but you know what I mean? And then, one would be great, one would stink, and one would be great. And you just like pull your hair out like, all right. So I finally said, let's try to do this ourselves and see if we can hack it in that space. And it's gone really, really well. It's unreal. Footwear, it's like, now that I know the game, I'm like, I should have done this 5 years ago. This is crazy.
Hey, so, Gabe, when are we getting the shoe going? No, I'm just kidding. We're not getting the shoe going.
Let us know, man. We can help you with that.
The shoe space is crazy. And it's one of the people that drives people the most nuts is when like a shoe changes, because I worked in the endurance space, the running space for a while. I worked at a running shop, and like runners love their shoes. And when the update changes from what it was before, people would like lose their mind. So I know that was the case with the Nano as well. So some consistency in shoe is nice.
Dude.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're not going to change this one for at least a couple of years. I see no reason, because for that exact reason, you know what I mean? So we have some new ones coming. We're launching an assault boot for our military guys. We're going to work on a barefoot shoe. We're working on a street shoe, just kind of like a Nike skateboarding shoe kind of vibe, Vans mix, and a few other things. So there's more in the works, but for the Savage one, just the training shoe, like it's going to be what it is for at least a couple of years, I think.
Hey, Gabe, you gotta get on those Vans,
exciting.
bro. This guy came to my house last week. We were filming and training. He's wearing some what were they, baby blue Vans? Is that what those were?
Yeah, they're great for travel because you can use them to work out, you can use them not, and I don't have to pack an extra pair of shoes. That's honestly the reason that I use them. And
There you go.
But
Well, Bear, we really appreciate your time, man. I feel like, with some of the guests that come on this show, it's like, man, I wish, we could do multiples over time, and hopefully we can get you back on in a couple of months, check in on how things are going at Born Primitive and talk about other areas, maybe a little bit more business focused. I just want to say, I really appreciate your time. For anybody who's interested in checking out Born Primitive, or maybe a little bit more about you, what's the best place to go?
Yeah, bornprimitive.com and all the social channels, and then I'm at Bear Handlon. I'm not anything special on social media, but that's where you can find me.
Oh, well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate all you guys for checking out the podcast. We talk about this every episode, but it helps out the podcast a lot. If you've gotten value from this episode, share it with a friend, leave the podcast a rating or review, and always keep training hard. See you guys for the next episode.